Welcome, everyone, to Alaska Quarterly Review's Reading and Conversation Series. This event is being recorded and will be available on the Alaska Quarterly Review YouTube channel. Please feel free to watch any of our prior programs and to share them. Alaska Quarterly Review is committed to presenting these programs without charge and to showcase vibrant and diverse voices and literary conversations with depth, complexity, and humanity. I'm Ronald Spatz, Editor-in-Chief of Alaska Quarterly Review, and before we begin, I'd like to make a few important acknowledgments. Alaska Quarterly Review gratefully acknowledges the Anchorage Museum for hosting and providing technical support for this event, and to the Center for the Narrative and Lyric Arts, Alaska Quarterly Review's 501c3 umbrella organization, which makes this event possible. I also want to make a land acknowledgement. Alaska Quarterly Review recognizes the indigenous land on which all Alaskans live, and Alaska Quarterly Review is located in Anchorage, and Anchorage is Dena'ina homeland. Dena'ina is the language spoken by the traditional, present, and future caretakers of this land, and land acknowledgement opens a space with gratefulness and respect for the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of indigenous peoples and marks our collective movement toward decolonization and equity. Today, we are delighted to be featuring a poetry reading by poet and writer and literary editor, Daniel Halpern. Daniel Halpern is the author of 9 collections of poetry. His collections include Something Shining, Selected Poems, Foreign News, Noon, Tango, Seasonal Rights, Life Among Other, A Lady Knife Thrower, Street Fire, Traveling on Credit. In addition, his poetry collections, he has edited more than 15 books and anthologies, including Dante's Inferno, translations by 20 contemporary poets. He also has edited the short fiction collections, The Art of the Tale, an international anthology of short stories, 1945 to 1985, and The Art of the Story, an international anthology of contemporary short stories, which includes works by Bobby Ann Mason, Joyce Carol Oates, and Martin Amin. As a literary editor, Halpern is the founder of the Ecco Press, now an imprint of HarperCollins, and he is currently an executive editor at Knopf. He was the co-founder and editor of Antaeus for 25 years, one of the most iconic and exceptional and influential literary journals in the last 55 years. In 1978, Halpern also founded the National Poetry Series. Halpern is the recipient of many grants and awards. Among them are his fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts, as well as an Editor's Award from Poets and Writers, and the Maxwell Perkins Award for Distinguished Achievement in the Field of Fiction. Of Halpern's poetry, Nobel Literature Laureate Derek Walcott said this: Daniel Halpern's poems are remarkable for their quiet, the intimacy of a man talking honestly to himself. His lines break with the gentle snap of a twig, with natural poignancy. And Nobel Laureate of Literature Nadine Gordimer added, Daniel Halpern has such a strangely disturbing sense of place that somehow becomes internal rather than descriptive, while at the same time physically evocative, something deeply sad. These poems speak to me in the best, most private way, as I always feel poetry should. It is my pleasure to welcome Daniel to our series. Over to you, Daniel.
Great. Thank you, Ronald. Thank you for the Alaska Quarterly for publishing my poems. I'm actually going to start out with the 2 poems which you will be publishing. The first poem actually came to me by way of a friend named Susan, and she texted me a dream, and I used part of her text for the first and last line of this poem. It's called Her Dream. I woke from a dream this morning We were dating. We weren't dancing, but there was rhythm. You asked me to live with you. You were so thoughtful. You made a place for me where you lived. The collection of my memories were placed on 3 shelves. They remain there in a kind of permanence. We kissed. I had red lipstick on. First, the 2 best lines of the poem. And the other poem that's in the Alaska Review is a poem called Late Fruit. And it has a epigraph by William Bronk, which goes, I thought you were an anchor in the drift of the world, but no, there isn't an anchor anywhere. Late fruit. I should have foreseen this defeat of the heart, but I insisted on believing that it would beat forever and never cease bearing fruit. I was a believer. I thought there was a territory, a lingua de terra, a febrile soil that survived the harvest, whose fruit was sweet with a juice, whose color and scent were perennial. I was a believer. I believed. I grow older. I bear the weight. I carry home the sack of that late harvest. I want to read a poem from my sister Susie, who recently passed away. And I wrote this poem for her when she was a little girl. I was babysitting, and she came home and she had a terrible wound in her leg. And it was so bad that I thought she was kidding. And I told her to stop fooling around. In fact, she had fallen on a sprinkler head and cut her leg open. And I felt guilty. So a couple of years later, I was able to write this poem for her, which is dedicated to her, called Scars. They are the short stories of the flesh, can evoke the entire event in a moment. The action, the scent and sound place you there a second time. It's as if the flesh decides to hold onto what threatens its well-being. They become part of the map, marking the pain we've had to endure. If only the heart were so ruthless, willing to document what it lived by branding even those sensitive tissues so information might flow back. It's easy to recall what doesn't heal, more difficult to call back what leaves no mark, what depends on memory to bring forward what's been gone so long. The heart's too gentle. It won't hold before us what we may still need to see. Another short poem called The Lady Knife Thrower. It's a poem actually about a woman I knew who was a contortionist. And I wanted to write a poem for her and about what that experience was like, but being a contortionist seemed a little bit too literal for a poem. So I turned her into a knife thrower, which made the poem a little bit easier to write. The Lady Knife Thrower. In the gay silver air of the tent, I'm at ease. Fingers that rest in my lap. Before me, the tools of my trade, cleaned, well-oiled, and waiting for the warmth of my hand, for the time when the flick of my wrist will send them out into the morning for their casual trip to my husband's waiting body. One at a time, they plant themselves at his sides, tucking in the air around his body. At night, under the big top, he is strapped to the board. With a roll of drums, I appear with my knives and release my repertoire of throws. There is no question in our lives of fidelity. At night, after the knives are cleaned and placed in their teakwood rack, we are all we desire. So it seems all these poems are for women or young girls, or this one is for my daughter, Lily. I wrote this when she was maybe less than a year old. I wanted to kind of try to capture the kind of amazing grace of a young baby's body. My attempt, called Her Body. It's in various parts. The fingers. They are small enough to find and care for a tiny stone, to lift it with wobbly concentration from the ground, from the family of stones, up past the pursed mouth. For this we are thankful, to a place level with her eyes, to take a closer look, a look into the true nature of stone. Like everything, it is for the first time. First stone, chilly cube of ice, soft rise of warm flesh, hard surface of table leg, first and lasting scent of grass, rubbed between the tiny pincer fingers. And there is the smallest finger poking the air, pointing toward the first heat of the single sun, pointing toward the friendly angels who sent her, letting them know contact's made. The eyes. We believe their color makes some kind of difference. The cast of it played off the color of hair and face, but it makes no difference, blue or brown, hazel, green or gray, pale sky or sand. When sleep burdened, they'll turn up into her, close back down upon her sizable will. But when she's ready for the yet to come, oh, they widen, grow a deep, cool sheen to catch the available light and shine with the intensity of the newly arrived. If they find you, they'll hold on relentlessly, without guile. The gaze, no less an interrogatory, fixed, intermediate, bringing to bear what there's been to date. Call her name and perhaps they'll turn to you. Or they might be engaged, looking deeply into the nature of other things. The affect of wall, the texture of rug, into something very small that's fallen to the floor and needs to be isolated and controlled. Maybe an afternoon reflection, an insect moving slowly, maybe just looking with loyalty into the eyes of another. The toes. Who went to market? Who stayed home? This one goes, this one doesn't. This one eats the flesh of grass-eating mammals. This one does not. In the 17th century, Basho, delicate master of the vagaries of who went where, wrote to one he loved, not of market and not of meat, but of something brief, abbreviated, like 5 unburdened toes fluttering like Celia in the joy of a drafty room. You go, I stay, 2 autumns. The signature. Who knows how they get here beyond the obvious? Who packaged the code that provided the slate for her eyes? And what about the workmanship that went into the fingers, allowing such intricate movement just months from the other side? Who placed with such exactness the minute nails on each of the 10 unpainted toes? And what remains beyond eye and ear, the thing most deeply rooted in her body, the thing that endlessly blossoms but doesn't age, in time shows greater vitality, the thing unlike the body that so quickly reaches its highest moment only to begin with little hesitation the long roll back, slowing all the way until movement is administered by devices other than those devised by divine design. The ageless thing, without a name, like air, both resident and owner of the body's estate. But this thing, only partially unpackaged, sings through the slate that guards it, contacts those of us waiting here with a splay of its soft, scrutinizing fingers. Her spirit is a sapling thing, something green, still damp, but resolute, entering this world with an angel's thumb pressed to her unformed body at the very last. A template affixed to her body when they decided it was time to let her go, for her to come to us, and their good work was done. An angel's thumbprint, a signature. Switching now to mail, I wanted to write a poem about playing catch in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles with my father back in the 50s or 60s, I'm not sure anymore. The poem is called Catch. Trees lined Vesper Street, San Fernando Valley, the 50s. Maybe they were sycamores or arroyo, willow, or hemlock. Maybe they are still standing along Vesper, between two of them that lived on our small property, whatever they were, whatever the leaf shape, fruit or nut. My father and I added to the neighborhood the scent of cheap discount rawling leather and the smack of ball to mitt, of playing catch of a boy and his father, of the easy, effortless toss back and forth. He was a young man, and a young man when he left us, when he left his life and ours. The boy I am still in those minutes tossing the ball back and forth. Catch, it's called. Want to play catch? He would say, or I would. Then, with leather on our hands, we walked to the street between whatever trees they were along Vesper to toss a ball back and forth, toss without talk, as I would toss to my daughter 40 years later in the backyard on the opposite coast as silently. The sound of the ball popping the leather in the silence below the Summer Valley trees, an occasional pale meridian-colored car sliding past us unnoticed down Vesper. Did I say it was the 50s? We were two young males, father and son, who didn't have much to say unless I tossed the ball beyond his reach, and he had to chase it down Vesper, a number of trees down the block, still young enough to run it down and return with an energy, with a muted impatience and exasperation, with a message placed unknowingly on his expression. What could it have been? Next poem is called Ponies. It's about waiting for somebody with a few horses. And it's a poem that is dedicated to James Wright. And if you know his poetry, you'll see what the influence was. Ponies. There were three, a marmalade of ponies, just in the field, feeding on grass. One roan, one buckskin, and a chestnut. I put my arms on the fence to wait and watch them without a carrot or motive for being there. In a while, they came gladly to the fence, a ways from where I stood, and hung their long, lovely heads over the wire barrier and looked at me. I was waiting for a friend who was late. There was a cafe up the road with good food. I had walked from my motel. She was meeting me here by the fence with the ponies in the field, who had joined me, looking for something with their heads still over the fence, maybe a carrot or a human hand, rubbing them in a kindly way. Their soft muzzles, the hard, flat nasal bone, their mouths now rubbing my palm for something beyond their field. I'm not sure. I was outside a town in Montana. A day in early fall, summer still warm on the ponies' hides. I'm from the city. The air here had a good vegetal in it, with the essence of ponies. The darkness of their eyes, their soft ears like furred flags in the currents of air, their legs pawing the fading, bronzing grass. The three were good company, waiting for my friend. The sky was darkening. There was a slight wind, with their scent of damp horse hung in the air. She was late. The day was expiring, the evening coming on. Another scent floated, white bark pine, loved by Clark's nutcrackers, grizzlies, and red squirrels. Could this trio of ponies be off soon into whatever the setting sun might hold for the yet to come? What we call, when we can think of nothing else, the future. And I'm going to end with a little poem of celebration, a celebration of solitude and eating alone, which is one of my favorite things to do. So the poem is called How to Eat Alone, and it's kind of a recipe poem. While it's still light out, set the table for one. A red linen tablecloth, one white plate, a bowl for the salad, and the proper silverware. Take out a 3-pound leg of lamb, rub it with salt, pepper, and cumin, then push in 2 cloves of garlic splitters. Place it in a 325-degree oven and set the timer for an hour. Put freshly cut vegetables into a pot with some herbs and the crudest olive oil you can find. Heat on a low flame. Clean the salad. Be sure the dressing is made with fresh dill, mustard, and the juice of hard lemons. Open a bottle of good Napa Valley Cabernet and let it breathe on the table. Pour yourself a glass of cold California Chardonnay and go to your study and read. As the story unfolds, you will smell the lamb and the vegetables. This is the best part of the evening. The food cooking, the armchair, the book, and bright flavor of the chilled wine. When the timer goes off, toss the salad and prepare the vegetables and the lamb. Bring them out to the table, light the candles, and pour the red wine into your glass. Before you begin to eat, raise your glass in honor of yourself. The company is the best you'll ever have. Thank you.